The great hall of the National Civic Forum grew silent as Chief Justice Eleanor Hart stepped toward the tall wooden podium, her long black robe flowing behind her like the steady current of an ancient river. She was 70 years old, and for nearly 5 decades she had been the unshakable voice of wisdom in the highest courts of the country. Born in a small mountain town and raised by a hardworking teacher and a quiet carpenter, she had carried humility, discipline, and courage into every case she ever touched. Yet today was different. Today she planned to address something that had been troubling her heart for months, something she believed threatened the very strength of the nation. Standing across the hall was Representative Maya Lark, 28 years old, a rising star in politics and known for her fiery speeches on justice reform. Her bold style had made her a national sensation. Her videos regularly went viral. Her passion drew crowds wherever she went, but passion without guidance can become a raging fire, and recently her speeches had begun to shake the trust between the branches of government. Legal scholars debated her words, talk shows dissected her statements, and millions of viewers waited to see what she would say next. She had been invited to speak at the forum to share her ideas on modern justice, yet no one expected this day to become historic. Maya stood at the podium, her voice bright and confident, as she spoke about inequality, harsh sentencing, and unfair policy. She described real struggles, real stories, real people she had defended before entering public service. The crowd listened attentively, nodding as her empathy and energy filled the room. But then her tone shifted, and so did the air. Judges, she declared, must stop hiding behind old interpretations of the law. When people are suffering, they must evolve or step aside in the name of progress. The audience stirred, some in agreement, others uneasy. Her words became sharper. She said that respect for the judiciary should depend on whether the judges understood modern justice. She said some judges were blocking the future instead of protecting fairness. Maya was powerful, confident, and unafraid, but she did not see the storm she was calling into the room. Chief Justice Eleanor Hart rose slowly from her front row seat. Her presence alone brought silence. Her steps were steady, measured, full of decades of discipline. The room froze as she approached the stage. Maya stepped back, slightly surprised by the interruption. Chief Justice Hart spoke, her voice calm, strong, and unwavering. Representative Lark, she said, I honor your passion for justice, but I must address the danger in your words. Maya blinked, taken aback by the directness. Everyone leaned forward, the air tense and expectant. Chief Justice Hart continued, you speak of progress but misunderstand the foundation on which progress securely stands. When you say judges must bend to popular belief rather than constitutional principle, you threaten the very structure that protects, on which progress securely stands. When you say judges must bend to popular belief rather than constitutional principle, you threaten the very structure that protects liberty. When you say respect should be conditional on agreement, you weaken the entire system. Maya stood silent, absorbing each word. The hall was quiet enough to hear the soft hum of the old ceiling vents. Still, Maya gathered her courage and asked, Chief Justice, I hear your concern, but please tell me where I have gone wrong. Her voice was softer, not defensive, but sincere, and to the shock of everyone, the Chief Justice did not admonish her. She taught her. Representative Lark, she said, the role of a judge is not to follow the pulse of emotion, but the steady truth of the law. You are chosen by the people to shape new laws. We are charged to interpret them without fear or favor. If either branch abandons its purpose, the nation cracks. Maya listened, but her own frustration whispered inside her heart. She remembered clients she could not save. She remembered decisions that felt unfair. She remembered the weight of injustice she had carried for years. Chief Justice Hart saw the conflict in her eyes and spoke with a gentler voice. When you attack judges, you erode trust in the only institution meant to protect the weak. When the tides of politics shift, the courts remain steady. That steadiness is not resistance to progress, but protection of principle. Maya lowered her gaze. The room waited, breathless, and then something unexpected happened. Maya took a slow breath, and her voice, when it returned, was quieter, humbled. Sincere. Chief Justice Hart, I think I allowed my frustration to guide my words. Instead of my understanding, I spoke out of pain rather than principle. And I see now how wrong that was. The hall gasped. Murmurs rippled across the room. Humility from a political leader was rare, almost unheard of. Maya continued, I care deeply about the people I serve, but I spoke in ways that disrespected those who protect the law. I realize now that I confused judicial independence with judicial resistance. And for that I am truly sorry. Chief Justice Hart stepped closer, her expression softening, and the hall held its breath. Maya looked up and said, and if you are willing, I want to learn how to Advocate for reform without harming the institutions that safeguard justice. Chief Justice Hart placed a steady hand on the podium. Beside Maya, Representative Lark, your willingness to reflect shows strength, not weakness. It is the character our democracy needs when passion and discipline walk together. Progress becomes real and lasting. Then the Chief Justice turned to the audience, her voice carrying warmth and authority. The branches of our government are not enemies, they are partners. When each understands its role, we build a future stronger than any single person can create alone. The hall felt transformed. Hope moved like a warm current through the crowd, and Maya stood straighter, her face bright with new understanding. Chief Justice Hart said, let this be a reminder to all who hold power. Humility is not surrender, humility is wisdom. And the room erupted into applause like thunder rolling across mountains, rising from every corner of the hall. Judges, lawmakers, scholars, students, even the staff whose lives had been shaped by the very system being discussed. The applause echoed long after Maya stepped down from the podium, carrying a new sense of purpose, one that would define the next chapter of her life, a chapter she had never expected to begin in front of an entire nation. The days that followed the National Civic Forum were unlike anything the country had expected. News outlets replayed the moment between Chief Justice Eleanor Hart and Representative Maya Lark again and again, calling it a rare turning point in modern leadership. Millions of viewers watched the clip in awe, some praising the Chief Justice for her wisdom, others praising Maya for her humility. Within hours, hashtags surged. Social media was full of people saying they wanted more leaders who could admit mistakes, more leaders who could listen and learn, more leaders who could rise above ego. It was as if something heavy had been lifted from the national spirit, and a quiet sense of hope began to settle across communities. Even those who disagreed politically found themselves agreeing on one simple truth: humility had power, and respect still mattered deeply in a nation struggling with division. Maya Lark felt the weight of the moment more than anyone. She spent the next morning in her quiet office, overlooking the city, thinking about the Chief Justice's words, remembering her own apology, and realizing how close she had come to damaging the very institutions she wanted to strengthen. She knew that admitting her mistake was only the beginning. Now she needed to act. She needed to show that her transformation was real, not just emotional. Maya requested a private meeting with Chief Justice Hart, and to her surprise, the Chief Justice agreed without hesitation. The meeting was held inside a small library tucked deep inside the old judicial building, its shelves lined with decades of legal history. When Maya entered, she felt as though she had stepped into the heartbeat of the nation. Chief Justice Hart sat at a long wooden table, reading through a set of notes. But when she looked up, her eyes were warm, full of patient expectation. Maya took a seat across from her and spoke softly. Chief Justice, thank you for meeting me. I want to learn. I truly do. I want to serve without harming the institutions that protect justice. The Chief Justice nodded gently, then asked Maya to explain what justice meant to her. Maya described every story she had carried over the years, every client who had been mistreated, every life that had been trapped by unfair laws, every community that felt abandoned. As she spoke, her voice trembled with old pain, but she also shared something new, a clarity that had come from the confrontation at the forum. Chief Justice Hart listened carefully, her posture steady, her focus unwavering. When Maya finished, the Chief Justice finally spoke. Representative Lark, she said, your passion is real, your heart is sincere, but passion becomes dangerous when it outruns understanding. The way forward is partnership, not pressure, and certainly not public condemnation. Maya nodded, taking in every word. The Chief Justice continued. The law must be reformed, but reform must come through proper channels, through legislation shaped with wisdom, not anger, through dialogue, not attack, and through respect, not force. Maya asked quietly, how do I begin? The Chief Justice smiled, the small, kind smile of someone who has taught thousands across decades of service. You begin by learning the limits of your own authority, she said, and you learn the strengths of ours. Then you find the meeting point, the place where change is possible without breaking the pillars that hold the nation steady. Maya wrote every word in her notebook. But then Chief Justice Hart did something unexpected. She reached into a drawer and placed a folder before Maya. Inside were case studies, reports, and letters from judges across the country describing problems they saw, everyday problems the law forced them to uphold, even though their hearts wished they could rule differently. Maya read page after page, tears forming in her eyes. She realized then that the judiciary was not her enemy, it was a partner, waiting for better laws, clearer guidance, and updated policy. She whispered, I had no idea. And the Chief Justice replied, that is why we talk. Without talking we cannot understand each other. Maya closed the folder with new understanding warming Her heart, this partnership was the real path to justice, not shouting, not fighting, not public attacks, but collaboration and respect over the next several weeks. Maya and Chief Justice Hart met frequently, not as opponents but as allies. Maya learned how outdated laws trapped judges into decisions that looked harsh but were required by the written code. She learned how policy gaps forced courts to act as problem solvers in areas where lawmakers had never provided structure. She learned how judges carried burdens the public never saw and how the system suffered when politics and law clashed instead of working together. Chief Justice Hart taught with patience and grace, and Maya listened with humility and determination. One afternoon, after a long session of study, Maya closed her notebook and said, "Chief Justice, I want to pursue a full justice reform bill, but I want it to be shaped by the truth, not by emotion. Will you help guide it?" The Chief Justice looked at her long and thoughtfully. "Representative Lark," she said, "you have grown in these last weeks. Your mind is sharper, your tone is wiser, and your heart is steadier. I will help you, but only if you promise to uphold respect for the separation of powers." Maya agreed without hesitation, and so they began working together on one of the most comprehensive justice reform proposals the country had seen in decades. The bill aimed to reduce sentencing disparities, improve legal access for the poor, strengthen rehabilitation programs, and give judges more flexibility in cases where existing laws were too rigid or outdated. Soon word spread across Congress that Maya Lark was writing a reform plan based not on outrage, but on partnership. Lawmakers from both parties grew curious, some skeptical, some impressed, but all agreed that something about Maya had changed. She carried herself differently, with more calm, more purpose, more reflection, and her colleagues noticed. Citizens noticed, reporters noticed, and the story grew. Maya was invited to speak again, this time at the Great Hall where everything had begun. The crowd was even larger than before, the energy brighter, the anticipation stronger. When Maya stepped to the podium, she felt a hush fall across the room, a respectful silence that had not existed weeks earlier. She spoke about justice and reform, but with a new tone, a tone shaped by humility, not heat. She spoke about partnership between lawmakers and judges. She spoke about the bill she was preparing. She spoke about lessons learned, and she thanked Chief Justice Hart publicly, calling her a guardian of wisdom. The Chief Justice, who sat in the front row, lowered her gaze with modest grace, but the room rose to its feet in applause, this time not for confrontation, but for transformation. Maya finished her speech with a message that echoed through the hall: we rise not by winning battles against each other, but by walking forward together. And the applause became thunder, rising, shaking the old walls, filling the hall with hope for a future built not on division but on respect and understanding. Outside, cameras flashed, reporters swarmed, citizens celebrated, social media erupted, and the nation felt something rare, a spark of unity. And Maya knew that this was only the beginning, because true change happens not in moments but in movements. And the movement had just begun.